The dragon has 3 heads. This assertion has puzzled readers and Game of Thrones fans alike for years, but what does it mean? Welcome back to the Fae of Ice and Fire series here on the Mirror Reads channel. This video can be watched on its own, but it is a piece of a larger puzzle, so I've linked the playlist in the description below. Many fans speculate that the 3 heads of the dragon refers to 3 dragon riders, perhaps the conquerors Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys. Many people also think that Daenerys and Jon Snow are 2 of the 3 heads in the main series. This idea is also the basis for the Tyrion Targaryen theory that perhaps Tyrion will be their 3rd. It's also said that Prince Rhaegar believed he was destined to father 3 children to reflect the 3 conquerors. After Aegon and Rhaenys were born and Rhaegar discovered that his wife would not survive another pregnancy, it's possible that he sought out another woman to carry his 3rd child, a Visenya. But what if everyone has it wrong? Now, with the additional information from House of the Dragon, we may be able to reach a more satisfying answer. In Season 1, Episode 10, we hear Daemon announce that he is incubating dragon eggs, and later hear him sing what seems to be an ancient Valyrian dragon song. Translated to English, it reads, "Fire breather, winged leader, but 2 heads to a 3rd sing. From my voice, the fires have spoken, and the price has been paid with blood magic. With words of flame, with clear eyes, to bind the 3, to you I sing. As one we gather, and with 3 heads, we shall fly as we were destined, beautifully, freely." It's a cryptic song, almost like a religious hymn. Daemon seems to be describing the relationship between riders and dragons. Quote, "We shall fly as we were destined." We. I believe the answer lies with the origins of the dragons themselves, so to go forward, we must go back. In the main story of A Song of Ice and Fire, we are given multiple explanations for the origins of dragons. Many believe they were originally discovered by the Valyrians in the massive volcanoes known as the 14 Flames. Some believe they existed before that, in the far-off land of Asshai by the Shadow. There are even tales of dragons in Westeros during the Age of Heroes, before the Valyrians arrived on the continent. The Maesters say the dragon bones have been found in the far north of Essos and even the jungles of Sithorios. But without a tool like carbon dating, it would be difficult for them to say exactly when the dragons arrived. In the world of Ice and Fire, we learn that Septon Barth believed that the blood mages of Valyria created dragons by breeding wyverns. And that isn't the only suggestion we get that Valyrians engaged in genetic manipulation. The book also notes the peculiar features of the Valyrians themselves, their silver blonde hair and purple eyes not seen on other people anywhere else in the world. Quote, "Populations in isolation can often show quite remarkable variations from what might be regarded as common. This may be a likelier answer to the mystery of the Valyrian origins, although it does not explain the affinity with dragons that those with the blood of Valyria clearly had." Our author is asking us to think about GMOs in connection to Valyrians and their dragons. It's not a stretch to assume that the true origin of the dragons has been right in front of us the whole time. But there's more to the mystery, so stick with me as we go further down the rabbit hole. In A Feast for Crows, the kindly man tells Arya about fireworms. Some say they are akin to dragons, for worms breathe fire too. Instead of soaring through the sky, they bore through stone and soil. If the old tales can be believed, there were worms amongst the 14 Flames even before the dragons came. The young ones are no larger than that skinny arm of yours, and they can grow to monstrous size and have no love for men. While it may seem like a no-brainer that the fire-breathing worms inside the 14 Flames are related to dragons, a connection to the Fae is less immediately obvious. Most of this series has been focused on the magic that lies below the ground. As we've covered before, East Sheed directly translates to the people of the mounds. We know that in this series, Fae magic is found inside hills, caves, and tunnels, so the fireworms inside the Valyrian volcanoes give us our first connection between dragons and underground Fae magic. As far as flight, we are told about wyverns in Sithorios. Quote, "Tyrants of the southern skies, with their great leathery wings, cruel beaks, and insatiable hunger. Close kin to dragons, wyverns cannot breathe fire, but they exceed their cousins in ferocity and are a match for them in all other respects save size. So the author has hinted, if not outright stated, that the Valyrians created dragons through selective breeding and genetic manipulation. This is especially likely because one source is Septon Barth, the widely recognized post-Valyrian expert on dragons. The Valyrians of old found a way to breed flying wyverns with tunneling fireworms. That could be done without magic, so why is this a Fae of Ice and Fire theory? As some of you already know, I'm a big fan of Preston Jacobs' series on the genetics of dragons. At the beginning, he establishes the idea that the ability to ride and hatch dragons are attached to the X chromosome. At surface level, this may seem like a baseless assertion, but if we take a look at the story, it actually makes a lot of sense. Humans with 2 X chromosomes are the ones who have eggs and give birth. In his series, Preston identifies Targaryen princesses who are likely to have 2 Valyrian X chromosomes, and the dragons that hatch in their proximity. He goes on to assert that the maesters of Old Town discovered the connection between certain Targaryen women and the power to hatch dragons, and then leveraged the faith and Andal culture to keep decision-making power away from aspiring dragon queens. And I don't disagree with him. There is religious and mythological support for this idea. Many real-world religions and ideas about magic are heavily focused on fertility and motherhood. If we compare the faith of the Seven to the Catholic Church, we see a pattern of the faith eliminating matriarchal society and fertility magic. But why would the maesters think of this to begin with? And where do we see this impacting the Targaryen dynasty? We go back to our old friend Septon Barth. For those who haven't read Fire and Blood or the World Book, Septon Barth was common-born, but due to his intelligence and insight became Hand of the King to Jaehaerys the Conciliator. Septon Barth is regarded in-world as an expert on dragons. It was with his help that Jaehaerys created the doctrine of exceptionalism, which decreed that incest wasn't a sin for Targaryens because Targaryens are magic and special, as evidenced by their purple eyes and winged fire lizards. But if Barth was besties with Jaehaerys, why would he take up a position against Targaryen women? Early in Jaehaerys' reign, his niece, Princess Aeria Targaryen, took the dragon Balerion and disappeared for a considerable length of time. When they returned, Balerion had what appeared to be significant new battle scars, and Aeria was deathly ill, feverish, and infested with human-faced worms. Worms that only died when Aeria was placed in cold water. It's a truly ghastly scene that Septon Barth refused to speak about after the fact. Characters could only speculate about where Balerion had taken the princess, but the 2 most likely destinations are Sothoryos and the smoking ruins of Valyria. Sothoryos is known to be full of monstrous beasts, unnerving parasites, and strange diseases. Valyria is rumored to be overrun by monsters that either survived or were created by the Doom, a massive disaster that ended the Valyrian Empire and obliterated most of the dragons. We've already established that Sothoryos is the home of the flying wyverns and Valyria is the home of tunneling fireworms. For our purposes, we'll assume that Balerion took Aeria to both locations. But why? Why on earth would Balerion do this? It's worth recalling that Balerion was the last known living creature to have seen Valyria before the Doom. We are also told that dragons are intelligent, perhaps as intelligent as humans. Maybe he just wanted to go home. Or maybe he remembered the recipe for dragons. Septon Barth, our Westerosi dragon expert, believed that the Valyrians bred dragons through genetic manipulation. He was also the person who put forward the idea that dragons are sexless or perhaps can change sex. He noted that a dragon's ability to lay eggs didn't seem to follow that of a typical bird or reptile. In the real world, when 2 different species are bred together like horses and donkeys, their offspring are sterile. Fun fact, that's one way we can be sure that they are in fact different species, unlike poodles and chihuahuas, which are members of the same species despite having very different appearances. If the Valyrians did create dragons by breeding 2 different species, wyverns and fireworms, It wouldn't be a stretch to assume that the dragons are naturally sterile, unable to reproduce, or at least unable to reproduce with each other. My hypothesis is that the Valyrians used blood magic to facilitate the fertilization of eggs that would otherwise be unable to house a dragon embryo. We are reminded multiple times that the Valyrians practiced blood magic. The Targaryen house words are fire and blood, after all. Multiple characters tell us that, quote, only death can pay for life, and we are told it was the mages who controlled the fires of the 14 flames, the volcanoes that were home to the tunneling fireworms. Given all that context, it's not much of a stretch to think that Valyrian women were used to create or prolong the line of dragons. But it is rumored that Targaryens literally carry the blood of the dragon. Balerion may have taken Arya to Sothorios and Valyria so that she could act as an incubator for a new line of dragons. This plan failed when the cold bath killed the worms inside her. There is a disturbing parallel in House of the Dragon as well. We see multiple times that dragon eggs are kept in hot incubators, even for transport, and pregnant Queen Aemma remarks that her bath is too cold, but that the maesters won't allow her to bathe in warmer water. Keep that in mind for later. So, what other evidence do we have? In my video on the Pact at the Isle of Faces, I discussed the idea that certain First Men were given green seer powers in exchange for blood sacrifice to the weirwoods, as part of their agreement with the Children of the Forest. Many people have theorized that Valyrian dragon riding abilities are analogous to First Men warging abilities, so it's logical to assume that the Valyrians had a similar pact with a species of fae from Valyria tied to the volcanoes rather than the rivers and the trees. Another through line we have seen in the Fae of Ice and Fire series is the idea that the fae take children as sacrifice. We see Craster offer his children to the others. It's rumored that the Night's King did the same. And we have speculated that Oberyn's sons met a similar fate, which is why we've never seen one. I'm far from the first person to speculate that child sacrifice was required for the Valyrians to create dragons and retain the power to bond with them. Company of the Cat has a video that explores the idea that Targaryen babies are periodically stillborn and deformed because of an ancient pact that gave them dragon riding abilities, and I agree with her about that. There are many real-world folktales about someone promising a firstborn child or princess to a witch or an evil fairy. They typically do this to gain something in the moment, but the fairy or the witch inevitably comes back to collect the child. It seems as though the Valyrians made a similar promise. Unlike the Starks, who seem to have promised the blood of men or kings, the Valyrians preemptively gave up the blood of their unborn children. Which brings us back to the power held by Targaryen women. I believe Preston was spot on when he hypothesized that the ability to bond with and hatch dragons is on the X chromosome. Targaryen women carry the power to birth human children and hatch dragon eggs. Now back to House of the Dragon. At the end of Season 1, Rhaenyra gives birth to a stillborn girl named Visenya, who in the book is described as having dragon-like features. Then later we see Daemon inside one of the caves at Dragonstone, singing to a large dragon, perhaps Jaehaerys' Vermithor. Earlier in Season 1, Daemon spent his time in Pentos obsessing over Valyrian scrolls, gaining access to knowledge that has since disappeared in Westeros. This is likely where Daemon learned the song. But what does he mean, 2 heads to a third sing? He says that, quote, the price has been paid with blood magic, which has a pretty plain meaning. We knew that Valyrians practiced blood magic, which is nearly synonymous with human sacrifice in this series. Robert from Deep Geek put forward the idea that the 3 heads the song refers to are the dragon, the rider, and the priest figure or officiant who sings the binding song. I believe he was headed in the right direction, but I'd like to take the idea another step further. Daemon is singing this blood magic song just after his daughter died. Perhaps the 3 heads of the dragon are the winged lizard, the human rider, and the spirit that gives life and intelligence to the dragon. Throughout Season 1, and really throughout Targaryen history, we are inundated with stories of stillbirths, and not typical stillbirths, but horrifying descriptions of babies with dragon-like features. Let's take a moment to discuss Tolkien's legendarium and recall Morgoth, the original Dark Lord. Morgoth's dragons were also intelligent. We know that many of Tolkien's dark creatures were created through some form of genetic manipulation and necromancy, though he might not expressly use the former term. Necromancy in this sense is any magic having to do with the dead, including the use of souls or spirits from dead people. Spirits are used to give life and intelligence to Sauron's wargs or werewolves, and the same is likely true of Morgoth's dragons. It's not far-fetched to think that George Martin may have come up with a similar explanation for the intelligence of his dragons. So the deaths of Targaryen babies aren't just to feed blood to the volcano fae, which is what I've decided to call them for lack of a better term. The spirits of those babies are also giving life and intelligence to the dragons themselves. And this isn't at all far-fetched. In the prologue to the 5th book, we learn that the spirits of wargs go into their animals after they die, and that over time they become one. This comparison extends to Valyrian and First Men death rites. The First Men bury their dead in barrows or burial mounds. We see the First Men giving blood to the roots of the weirwoods. The Targaryens burn their dead, giving their blood over to the fire. And speaking of singing and burning and dead babies, the rebirth of dragons that we see at the end of the 1st book is kicked off when Dany loses her unborn son, Rhaego. Dany smothers the vegetative Drogo and lights a funeral pyre. Mirri Maz Duur is also given to the flames and dies singing a strange song that Dany cannot understand. Let's not forget here that Dany is told that her stillborn baby was deformed. It had wings and was full of grave worms because he had been supposedly dead for years. We don't see another stillbirth described exactly this way, but recall Rhaenyra's baby Visenya was also born with dragon-like features. We also see these features on more than one of Maegor's stillborn children. And here is probably the only place that I diverge from Preston's theory. He identifies an uptick in the number of dragons around Rhaena, Rhaenys, and Rhaenyra, 3 Targaryen women who likely carry 2 Valyrian X chromosomes. And he's not wrong. However, these are also periods when Targaryen babies are dropping dead left and right. When Rhaena was a young woman in King's Landing, Maegor had multiple wives, none of whom delivered a living child. Likewise, Rhaenyra's mother Aemma never delivered a healthy baby after Rhaenyra was born, but did suffer multiple miscarriages and stillbirths. In House of the Dragon, we see Daemon faced with the same decision as his brother Viserys years before. His wife was dying in childbirth. The baby might be saved with a C-section, a procedure that would certainly be fatal for the mother. Viserys chose to have Aemma cut open without Aemma's knowledge or consent. When Daemon discovered that Laena could not be saved, he left the matter up to her. And Laena chose to die a dragon rider's death, consumed by her dragon Vhagar's flames. This horrific event was likely what sealed Daemon's interest in learning more about the hatching of dragons and the nature of Targaryen babies, to perhaps have some kind of rhyme, reason, or closure for the senseless death of his beloved wife, Laena. In the last few generations of Targaryen rule, we see an increasing obsession with hatching dragons. Aerion Brightflame supposedly drank wildfire to become a dragon. Mad King Aerys supposedly wanted to turn King's Landing into his personal funeral pyre so he could transform into a dragon. And it's speculated that King Aegon V, Maester Aemon's baby brother, was just as mad and guilty as all the rest. It is widely speculated that the tragedy at Summerhall was the result of an attempt to hatch dragon eggs gone wildly wrong. George Martin has been deliberately secretive on this subject, including spilled ink across the relevant page of the World Book, but we do receive a bit of information. Quote, The last years of Aegon's reign were consumed by a search for ancient lore about the dragon breeding of Valyria, and it was said that Aegon commissioned journeys to places as far away as Asshai by the Shadow, with the hopes of finding texts and knowledge that had not been preserved in Westeros. What became of the Dream of Dragons was a grievous tragedy born in a moment of joy. In the fateful year 259 AC, the king summoned many of those closest to him to Summerhall, his favorite castle, there to celebrate the impending birth of his first great-grandchild, a boy later named Rhaegar, to his grandson Aerys and granddaughter Rhaella, the children of Prince Jaehaerys. We know that basically the entire Targaryen family was there. Wildfire was involved, something went wrong, and 3 of the survivors were Aerys, his sister-wife Rhaella, and their son Rhaegar, who was born as the fires raged and devoured his royal relatives. It's generally assumed that Bloodraven was behind this, or the Maesters, or even Tywin and Pycelle, but I don't think so. I think this was all Aegon. Somehow, he gained the same knowledge that Daemon did a century or so before, that the spirit of an infant is required to bring life to dragon eggs. Aegon wasn't trying to sacrifice himself, or his sons, or his grandson Aerys. He was attempting to sacrifice his unborn great-grandson Rhaegar. And perhaps this is why the accident occurred. The noble knight of the Kingsguard, Duncan the Tall, couldn't stand by and watch his king burn an innocent woman and baby, just like he couldn't stand by and watch a prince of the realm beat an innocent Dornish girl to death. Dunk likely set off the chain reaction that resulted in the conflagration when he grabbed Rhaella to get her out of the castle. It doesn't take much for things to go very wrong very fast when wildfire is involved. So let's take all of this information and revisit Daemon's song from House of the Dragon episode 10. Fire breather, winged leader, but 2 heads to a third sing. From my voice the fires have spoken, and the price has been paid with blood magic, with words of flame, with clear eyes, to bind the 3 to you I sing. As one we gather, and with 3 heads we shall fly as we were destined, beautifully, freely. 2 heads to a third sing could refer to a wyvern, a fireworm, and the spirit that binds them together. And as we have established, when 2 creatures are combined to create a new creature, the offspring is unable to reproduce. From my voice the fires have spoken, and the price has been paid with blood magic. So, the Valyrian blood mages discovered a way to prolong the new species by binding them to human souls. And this same magic is what enables the Targaryens to bond with dragons as riders. It also explains why other Valyrian families seem to lack this particular ability, as dragon riding was limited to particular families in Valyria, the Dragon Lords. Some final food for thought before we part ways. In the first episode of House of the Dragon, Viserys says to Rhaenyra, "The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. They're a power man should never have trifled with." Remember, dear viewer, that Viserys says this in the same episode where he lost his wife and son in childbirth. From that perspective, I believe Viserys is correct. In A Clash of Kings, Stannis is faced with the prospect of burning his bastard nephew so that Melisandre can wake a dragon from stone. Stannis asks, "What is the life of one bastard boy against a kingdom?" And Davos replies, "Everything." I'd like to take a moment to thank, of course, my top-tier patrons, Tom Silver and Zach from the club. Feel free to check out the rest of the Fae of Ice and Fire series linked in the playlist. Hit the like and subscribe button. If you are interested in the rest of the series, there will be another follow-up about dragons, as well as a return to our regularly scheduled programming about the North and whatever I was talking about with Weirwoods before the holidays and everything got disrupted. So thank you all for sticking around. It's great to see you as always. Let me know what you think in the comments. Leave your questions, suggestions, your theories, your takes. Let me know what you're excited to see in House of the Dragon Season 2. Catch you next time.